Hello. In the last video, we covered the head element, and this video is going to cover structuring the body element with structural elements. So first of all, why do we need these structural elements? HTML is used specifically to mark up content of a web page, and in that process it needs to say things about that content. And one of the things that's really important is that content get organized and structured into chunks, and these chunks are what you're ultimately going to end up styling with CSS to create a whole complete web page. And so the structural elements that are in place here and that you're going to learn in this video will help you meaningfully structure and divide up your content into appropriate pieces. So first of all, HTML is a linear language, meaning that content that appears higher in the document is going to appear higher on the page by default, although that can be changed with CSS. So generally in your body, you're going to place the first thing on the page, and then the second thing, and then the third thing, and so on. So most often you'll start with a header, including things like navigation and logo and banner and things like that. And then you'll move into a main content area, maybe a sidebar. And then at the very end, you'll add in a footer. And they'll just go top to bottom like that. The structural elements that you're going to learn in this video include two types: non-semantic and semantic, and I'll discuss the differences between these and which one you should use later. But let's start with non-semantic structural elements. These are really easy because there's only two non-semantic structural elements, and those are div and span. And you can think of these as basically an empty box in which content can go. There's nothing about div or span that says anything about that content, and there's nothing that it does other than help you chunk out things in order to style them. And div is a block element, and span is an inline element. So you will use div whenever you want to create a structural block, and span when you want to create an inline structural kind of thing. Span is much less frequently used. So you'll use div a lot more frequently than you'll use span. Span is really just for any text that you want to format a particular way, but isn't going to really be targetable through other means. So span is very infrequent. So div is the one you really need to know how to work with. And div can contain anything you want pretty much, but it's kind of standard here is for dividing out the portions of the page, as I discussed earlier, like header, banner, navigation, main content area, columns if you have columns, sidebars, advertisements, footers, anything like that. Any of those page sections, you're going to want to divide out via div. And so your page completely, if you use div, might end up with half dozen divs throughout the page, all of which contain different kinds of things. So this one may be my banner, this one may be my nav menu, and this one may be my main content area. And maybe within the banner, I have a different area for logo and another area for social media links. And that's basically how you ultimately use div. It's a very straightforward kind of thing. However, div has very recently been kind of falling out of favor as HTML5 becomes more and more common for web developers to use. And that's because div says nothing about the type of content within it. So div is completely non-semantic. So semantic within the context of HTML means that the tag says something about the content within it. And most HTML tags are semantic, but div is a non-semantic one, and HTML5 introduced semantic alternatives to div. And I'll go over all of those, but one more quick comparison here. Before, in the text markup video, I discussed strong emphasis and emphasis, strong and EM, versus italics and bold. And I said in those that strong and EM should be used for any content you want to emphasize. However, there's certain kinds of content, such as a book title, that needs to be italicized without being emphasized, and that's where I and B come into play. And this is exactly the same kind of scenario. Some content is going to fit within particular types of content, and these blocks should generally be done with semantic elements. However, sometimes you need a block that does not fit any of those things and does not need to be, say, a navigation block or a footer block. And that's where div still has its uses even within the HTML5 semantic elements. I'll go over that a little bit more in a bit. Let's look at these semantic alternatives to div. So the major ones are header, footer, nav, article, which is used for things like blog posts, section, which is used for sections of a post or a page, aside, which is used for anything that doesn't really relate to the main content area, such as a sidebar or an advertisement or anything like that. Figure, which is used for like graphs or images with their captions. And there's a few others, but these are much less common ones that most developers don't end up using in most contexts. These are the big ones: header, footer, nav, article, section, aside, and figure. And they mostly make sense based on their name. Article, section, and aside are a little different, but the rest of these mostly make sense based on their name. The question then becomes, which of these should you use, semantic or non-semantic structural elements? My suggestion is to use semantic structural elements. Yes, they are a little bit more difficult to use because there's a lot more of them and they need to be used accurately, unlike div, which can be used for any kind of content. However, because they're semantic, they allow browsers to better understand the page, and they allow for a more elegant code structure. So I strongly encourage you to use semantic elements. That said, it is not wrong to use divs all the way through, so it's a choice that you will need to make. Additionally, you should know that if you are using semantic elements, certain things won't fit within any of these, and those are what should be applied via div. So for instance, let's say I have a page with a header bar and a nav menu, and I've got a couple of section elements, and I have a footer. A very simple page structure. However, there may be contexts in which I need to wrap all of this in a container that I can style all of my content with that container around it. And there is no semantic equivalent to the container because the container is just a box going around everything. And therefore, that's something I would want to do as div. So if anything, if you are wanting to add any kind of a block, but it has no actual semantic value, it has no semantic element that would describe its content, you still want to use div. So most HTML5 semantic structures, you'll see a few divs here and there that are just denoting blocks that have no semantic value. Finally, if you have any questions about any of these, consult this flowchart. It's provided by HTML5 Doctor, and you can just Google semantic element flowchart and find it pretty easily. And this flowchart will allow you to figure out which of the semantic elements is the correct one for the content that you're looking at. And as you'll see at the end of the flowchart, if nothing ends up being a yes here, then you end up using a div for it. Thanks for watching.